So in ecology, there is a concept called the Allee effect. And it's kind of obscure, it's not well known, but it basically claims that even if there are plentiful resources, certain organisms, certain animals, need a large enough population in order to effectively thrive in this otherwise rich environment. The classic go-to example is like a wolf pack. If you have a small wolf pack, even if there's plenty of deer, shelter, everything else, it doesn't have enough members in its pack to sustain itself. Maybe the parents are not able to simultaneously raise their pups and fend off other competing wolves or predators, as well as hunt and provide, even in a good environment, right? And I think it's pretty obvious that humans who evolved in tribes and communities and large multi-generational families they're an organism that the Allee effect applies to. And there is this certain mentality, especially in America, of the nuclear family, along with a couple other narratives that have ultimately resulted in the absolute destruction of the family, of the real family unit. And it's the reason for, among many others, a drop in birth rate and a lack of interest in having children. And it makes sense, right? If you were in a tribe and you are living with your parents and you're having children, and you're also living with your cousins and uncles and aunts and grandparents and the whole shebang, you are all helping one another, you're all cohesive, and the labor, and it's an immense amount of labor to have a child and to raise them properly. That makes it possible. If you instead are attempting this nuclear family, where you have the breadwinning father who goes off to work, and say they work 8 hours a day plus or minus 1 or 2 hours of commute time, and then the mother is left home alone with a child or multiple children, you're not going to succeed at the same level. You're not going to have as many children because they are more costly. And I just think that's a very interesting lens to observe everything through, because what it basically says is, it's not necessarily the economy that is preventing people from having children and living a normal human life where you have a family and you grow up, you become a provider, you have children, you get to watch them have children. It's not the economy, it's not some housing aspect, even though that obviously is an issue, because for every 10% of house price rises, fertility rates drop by 1%. And so, if house prices have doubled, that's a 100% increase. Fertility rates drop by 10%. That's very significant. But it's only really an issue if you need to live on your own, right? If you do a multi-generational thing, if you live in a real tribe, a community, probably the cost of housing in that scenario is much lower, right? Because it's divided amongst all of you. But it's interesting to think about this, and I might not be getting quite the right point across, or very effectively, but it's actually the nuclear family, the father, mother, and then children, that is like this toxic cultural brainwashing that we have had, because previously in all of human history, that is too small of a pack for humans to successfully rear their children. And while maybe one generation from a multi-generational family could have enough resources and everything to rear some children, it doesn't reach replacement rate. And when you don't reach replacement rate, it continues to drop and go down over time, and it only becomes harder and harder as your family continues to shrink, right? A previous generation might have had 5 kids, and those 5 kids may have had, on average, 4 or 5 more kids. That's a huge family. Now you're getting people who, they have 1 kid, they have 2 kids, and then those kids have 1 or 2 cousins who are distant, and then maybe some of them have 1 or 2 kids, but a large portion of them don't have kids at all. It's like we were on a train and it ran out of gas, and yeah, there's sure there is some forward momentum, but there's not enough of anything there to keep it actually going. And you can see that this is like inherently true, because somewhere like Utah, which has very much that nuclear family mindset, their fertility rate has been plummeting. It used to be one of the highest because of the Mormon mentality of having great big families, but all of these other economic factors have kicked in. But if you look at the Amish, which don't have the nuclear family idea in mind because they are a community and they all work together intergenerationally and across, cousins and aunts and everything, their fertility rate is high. It's like, I think it's like 6 per, it's like a fertility rate of 6 versus like Utah's 1 point whatever, which is well below replacement rate of 2.1. And so, it's very clear that a community and a family needs to be big in order for us to continue. And I don't know, the Allee effect, I think, is just a nice way to look at it, because it didn't set out to explain anything in that regard. It's just an ecological concept. But humans are animals, and so, why not apply ecology and those concepts to us? Another very interesting concept in ecology is called a supernormal stimuli. And, the example of that sticks out in my mind that is easily observed is if you go into a parking lot at nighttime, you'll find all these beetles and water bugs if you're by a swamp. And the reason is because the lights above a parking lot are somewhat polarized, especially when they reflect from the pavement. Well, these water bugs use the moonlight and the water where they would normally lay eggs, which is also polarized. They use that to navigate to go into new ponds and new streams. So when they find this incredibly polarized source of light, they think to themselves, my God, this is a great place, I have found it. The dopamine's released in their little brains, and they go land in the parking lot, and inevitably they dry out, they get ran over, whatever, right? They didn't evolve with the stimuli of more polarized light than what a water body and moonlight produces. So it's a supernormal stimuli. They are attracted to it, but it's not the right environment, and so they die. I think that's absolutely happening with humans as well. And I think that's like a city. You go there and you look around, there's all these houses, there's all these people, there's all these resources. There's so many restaurants with different foods, and there's all this income that I can put in my bank, and I don't, you have a nice savings account. And by all measures, these are good resources for you, right? But for some reason in the city, you have a lower fertility rate. That sounds like you're a bug in a fucking parking lot. You're receiving all these signals, but there is no next generation, right? You might be healthy, you might be working out and building muscle and signaling to other people how functional you are, but through the lens of evolution, through the lens of actual real community, right, where maybe you have a deeper connection, none of it's there. It's all false. It's just like a great big, like a little Debbie cookie. It tastes very sugary, and you go, this is good for me, I need calories, because, throughout most of human evolution, the issue was getting enough calories. You basically cannot eat food in the wild that is not nutritionally dense. Like, you go find a big pile of meat. Well, that's a grass-fed animal, right? It's full of protein, it's full of all the vitamin K and vitamin A and retinol and whatever that you would ever need. And any leafy greens are inherently, more healthy than iceberg lettuce. So, like, your brain is programmed to seek calories. And now we've invented new food, the supernormal stimuli food, that is, it's like hydrogenated palm oil and sugar, and it has no vitamins and no minerals, but we can detect the calories, and so we seek that. And I think there's AI slop, but there's also just good old-fashioned slop, which is shitty food and a stupid environment where you get some signal, it looks good, it feels good, but it's not the real thing and it's empty. And so, I think these two concepts together, the Allee effect combined with supernormal stimuli, that explains a big portion of what people are struggling with, because, our fertility rate's down, our families are divided, we got to go chase money instead. We got to be dedicated to the system and earn a lot of money. We can't have a dedication to our actual families, because the stimuli of a paycheck it's greater than the real thing, right? I think those two concepts really explain a lot of America's and the current condition of really every country, because fertility rates across the board have been dropping like a rock. I think those two concepts are very, very powerful, and there's more to think about on top of that, but I don't hear anybody talk about them in this context, in this light, and I just kind of wanted to post that out there and share my thought. So I don't know. Look it up and think about it in the context of humans. The Allee effect, which I believe is spelled Allee, and if it's not, you'll figure it out. And then the supernormal stimuli. That's a real thing in regards to wildlife, and it's often used to explain junk food, but also, doom scrolling. You get all that dopamine, you're searching for something, and it's probably hijacking. Normally if you were out in the wilderness trying to survive, you would be looking for berries or, maybe a straight piece of wood to build a tent with, or, something to hunt with, the right type of rock. But instead you just scroll, looking for something useful, and it never comes. Even if it is, that itself is probably another supernormal stimuli thing. I don't know. I'm obviously not very well polished on filming or communicating or whatever. So, I'll just end it here like this.